Good afternoon. We are calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of Intergovernmental Relations. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm joined today by Council Members Fry, Quincy, and Andrew Johnson, and we are a quorum of the committee. And we have two items on our agenda for discussion today. The first is our first opportunity to hear proposals for new policy ideas for potential inclusion on our 2016 state legislative agenda. And to walk us through the presentation, I'll invite Sasha Bergman up front. Thank you, Ms. Bergman.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council members. Sasha Bergman with the IGR Department. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. In a moment, we'll hear 4 presentations for new legislative agenda ideas for your consideration as we look to update our 2015 legislative agenda and policy positions for the upcoming 2016 session. And as you know, each year we convene a group of interdepartmental staff from across the enterprise in order to collect ideas for the legislative agenda and policy positions. Some of these ideas are just tweaks to existing language and policies, but some of them are new, and so you will hear from the new ideas today. At a future meeting, we plan to bring forward our recommendations for a comprehensive update to the existing policy positions and legislative agenda for your consideration and adoption in the IGR committee and then ultimately the full council. And today we're going to hear from the City Attorney's Office to start on 2 of their proposals and then business licensing in CPED with a couple of others. And so unless there are any questions about that, I will turn it over to Susan Siegel, our City Attorney, to get started.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Siegel.
Terrific. It's up and moving. Good afternoon. We have come up with 2 proposals. And the first deals with, with the phenomenon that's come to be known as party buses. And we got interested in this issue for a couple reasons. One is that there was a research study that was done using City of Minneapolis Police Department records called Mapping the Minneapolis Market for Juvenile Sex Trafficking. And the researchers who worked on that project identified one of the places for recruitment and where juvenile sex trafficking type of activity occurs is on these party buses. And generally speaking, I mean, they're often old school buses that have been converted. You can go online and see photographs of them tripped out with stripper poles. Minneapolis Police Department has evidence of a lot of underage drinking. They were causing problems. Recently, a couple of guns were taken off one of these buses at the Old Colony gas station up on the north side. So it's not a good thing. We have zoning laws in place in our city, and these buses can travel wherever they are. What you're seeing now is a screenshot that the police department got advertising party bus action. Will supply everything for everybody for $10. You can get on the bus. It's $1 for shots, no drama, no weapons on the bus, and no gang banging. So these are kids that are renting out these buses. So our thought was, as we hold hotel operators responsible for activity that goes on inside their restaurants and bars, and as we hold homeowners responsible through our social host ordinance about what happens inside their home, that something like that should be done with these commercial passenger vehicles, and that the owners of these vehicles who are leasing them out and making a profit from this should have some responsibility to control what's going on. And so our proposal would be to treat this on the civil side, not to create a new crime, but Minnesota Department of Transportation currently issues certificates, and you need one of these certificates in order to operate a commercial motor carrier of passengers. And now those certificates can be either not granted in the first place or taken away for safety violations. It doesn't have good brakes, or you don't have insurance, for those two reasons. So our proposal is to add to state law that motor carriers have a responsibility to try to prohibit adult entertainment involving nudity and underage consumption. That if that kind of activity was found to be going on a commercial motor vehicle, that the Minnesota Department of Transportation would have authority to sanction the operators, perhaps fine them, suspend their certificates, or eventually revoke their certificates. And last year on the legislative agenda, in connection with the city's juvenile sex trafficking work, we proposed a bill that was passed into law to prohibit, to make it a felony level crime for adults to solicit prostitution from 16 and 17-year-old kids. That passed, and in fact, that a number of charges have been brought forward in connection with the sting operation coordinated by the Minneapolis Police Department and the work of Sergeant Grant Snyder. And so this is another, as we're doing our work on juvenile sex trafficking and trying to keep kids safe in our city, another proposal along those lines that we think can make a real difference. Any questions on that?
So I have a few questions, and a couple might be for Ms. Bergman, maybe at the end. But for our proposal, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the proposal. So the proposal is more about modifying how the state regulates rather than authorizing our regulation. And maybe you can tell me a little bit about why that's the proposal. And the only reason I was questioning this or just wanting to know more is, there's clearly illegal behaviors that you've identified that are, in violation of existing state law, but often through business licensing with other types of businesses, there may be other behaviors that are not just explicitly in violation of existing state or city laws, but can be troublesome as well. So I don't need to go down a list of examples, but that's why I was just curious about this choice. And is this just the most efficient path to take care of the most egregious behavior, and our ability to control that better, or get that to an authority to control that better, or kind of what's the thought process on this?
Good question, Madam Chair. Our thought is, because these are mobile buses, that really to effectively regulate this, it should be on a statewide basis. And it doesn't require us to set up just this municipality to set up a whole new licensing scheme just for these kinds of vehicles. It's efficient. MnDOT already does this, and conditioning an owner or operator's ability to be able to drive their vehicles is a very effective mechanism without involving a whole lot of additional machinery. So that was our thought. And I know our Minneapolis Police Department now coordinates with the inspectors from MnDOT, when they are doing enforcement actions. And so they have a good relationship and may partner on doing some stings, if they're seeing activity here.
And we have another person with a question, but do we have any idea of, maybe this is the question. Have we talked with the state about their willingness and ability to incorporate these additional kind of checks into their system, and their willingness to not just have the law on the books, but essentially kind of be a partner in enforcing it? I mean, that's sort of the point. So I just wanted to know what our conversations have been with them to date and how we thought this would actually work in practice.
Madam Chair, Melissa Lesh organized a meeting last week or the week before, where we met with the government affairs leadership at MnDOT along with the department heads who are in charge of this certification of commercial motor vehicles. They were very interested and very open to exploring this. So that initial meeting has taken place already, and they were very open to the idea. I mean, they want to study it, they want to know more, they want to work with us on how it might work in practice, what might be required. Is that a fair summary?
Madam Chair, Melissa Lesh, IGR. I think Ms. Siegel described it accurately. The only piece I would add is that the Department of Transportation already has similar authority when it comes to limousines. And so this would be expanding that to cover these party buses. We need to come up with a definition of party bus. I think that will be part of the challenge. But right now they do have the ability to revoke licenses for violations of local ordinances that might occur within a limousine. So it would be replicating that type of a structure.
Okay. Councilmember Quincy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a similar question because I can imagine these party buses probably would have to pass through multiple jurisdictions before they got to downtown Minneapolis. I wondered if, in addition to the Department of Transportation, if we've talked to the State Department of Public Safety, as well as other county and local jurisdictions, St. Paul, Rochester, Duluth, St. Cloud, would this something we're initiating that they would sign on as support, or is this something that could even be coming from the league?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Quincy, yes to all of the above. We did bring this through the League of Minnesota Cities policy process over the summer. It was adopted by I believe the Improving Service Deliveries Committee, and we do anticipate approval by the full board at the November meeting. We also have been in touch with several other cities, and as you know, it tends to be some of the larger regional hubs, maybe places that have college towns that are seeing a proliferation of this. I'm meeting next week with staff from the Department of Public Safety to talk about this and the city attorney's other proposal that you'll be hearing about shortly, to see how they would feel about this, since it's largely regulated by MnDOT with local enforcement for the ordinance violations. I expect that they'll be fairly comfortable with it. And then I would also add that we are bringing this to the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, to their legislative committee. They have been supportive of this approach in the past. There have been previous attempts at legislation that took a different approach, took more of a criminal side approach as opposed to the civil side that we're looking at today. So we do anticipate them to be supportive as well as they have been in the past. So we are going to be doing all of that type of work. It's very important. We agree.
Okay. So then my follow-up question on this, and I don't know if it's for you or Ms. Bergman, is about that. So you've kind of gone through what are some of the organizations that might support or be approached for their support. Is the ask to us going to be that we would have this as a support item, as a priority item? I think often in the past, and maybe this is coming forward at the next cycle, we have sort of seen an outline of what's the proposal to us. Is it for support? Is it for us to be the lead on a legislative policy proposal?
Madam Chair, our suggestion would be for us to be the lead on this. Given the number that we're hearing about the proliferation of these buses in downtown Minneapolis, they really are concentrated here. But given the positive response we've had from all of the other partners and other cities that we have brought this to, our hope would be, ideally, I would love this to be included in a Department of Transportation into their agency bill, if we can come to a place where they're comfortable with that kind of language. So we know we have a lot of other large fish to fry. This is a bonding year, but we do believe that it's appropriate for us to take the lead on that because we have such strong support from other partners right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Ms. Siegel, did you want to continue on?
Okay, and our second proposal relates to the state's driver diversion program pilot in law. Back in 2008, the Minnesota legislature approved a law change to provide for a pilot diversion program for individuals who have had their driver's license suspended or revoked for unpaid fines and fees. And our office has been a member of that program and has had a driver diversion program since we started in 2010. And it's been a very successful program. We have referred a little over 2,500 participants to that program. And what it does is it allows individuals to get their driver's license reinstated so that they're driving legally with insurance while they're put on a payment plan to pay off any unpaid fines and fees. And they're also given some education, on managing finances and those sorts of things. Driving offenses in the city of Minneapolis, of the top 5 reasons for the Minneapolis Police Department to issue citations or arrest individuals, 4 of those 5 all relate to driving offenses. And it has a hugely lead the way that
What is 4 of 5? I think you might have.
Yeah, it's
4
4
of
out of
5
the top
what?
5 reasons.
Reason.
The number 1 is bench warrants, arrests and warrants, and then the next 4 are all somehow or another driving related offenses. And as we've dug into this, and as the Minneapolis Police Department has dug out statistics, it's a hugely difficult system for people who are poor. And essentially, at some level, criminalizes people for being poor. A $50 speeding ticket now, the courts are funded in part through surcharges. A $75 surcharge is added on to the $50 speeding ticket, with $3 on top of that to support the Hennepin County Law Library. So suddenly you've got $128 to pay. If you can't pay it, you can go down to the traffic office in Hennepin County Government Center, which would be an afternoon or a morning of your time taken away from your job, kids, school, whatever. And then you go in front of a hearing officer, second trip downtown, and you can get the fine waived. But then in order to get the surcharge waived, you have to make a third trip down to the government center to appear in front of a judge. And the judges are actually not supposed to waive those, but there are judges who will suspend that. And so then if you have enough unpaid tickets, your driver's license then gets suspended, and then you get caught into driving after suspension of a driver's license. The diversion program now is limited to only certain jurisdictions who are part of the pilot, and it's been extended once, but it will sunset again in June of 2017, which means that everybody who's in the program now, they're required to pay off all their fines and fees by the sunset date. And of our numbers, a significant number, over half, have flunked out of the driver diversion program because they can't keep up with this 18-month payment schedule. So our proposal, we think this is a great program, and our proposal would be to make it a permanent program and to see if it can't be expanded statewide.
So I was curious whether we're keeping any data by race on the participants in our own driver diversion program, and if others statewide are keeping that kind of data as well. So then we kind of see a little bit more of a picture even of who can be successful in the program as it stands today and who is not being successful because of the parameters of the program or other reasons.
In our program, I should have brought that slide along, but it's something like I want to say 90% of our participants are people of color in our driver diversion program. It may be 60. It's what? 75%. I'm sorry. I know we had it on a slide on a presentation we did just yesterday, and I couldn't remember, but 75% of Minneapolis participants are of color. And it would be, I know that the diversion provider keeps those numbers, and we could get that probably for the other communities as well. They may not be quite as high because some of them are, in suburban areas, but.
Okay. And okay, do we know why the pilot, so tell me again how long the pilot program has been in existence.
It was enacted into law in 2008.
Do we know why this has remained a pilot for so many years? I mean, this is like 7 years of a pilot.
Right. Madam Chair, that's a very good question. I think the Department of Vehicle Services, this does require a fair amount of staff time at the department. And so I think they've been a bit reluctant without added funding to expand this program statewide, because they do the screening for eligibility. We would also like to push for them to relax a couple of areas, a couple of types of prior offenses that they screen out now, to make it available to more people. But I think it is. Melissa, do you have any other thoughts to add? Yeah, I think it really is the Department of Vehicle Services and a staff time issue for them.
Okay. Well, so then I guess I would ask, like we discussed for the prior proposal, who else is supporting this change, and would we be lead or a support on this?
Madam Chair and council members, I think is a similar answer to the last one. We do recommend that, that we be the one to raise this. This really does fit in very well with the city's priorities around equity and some of the conversations that are happening now at the Capitol when it pertains to criminal justice and equity issues. We are having conversations with other jurisdictions. We've heard a lot of support from St. Paul, Ramsey County. We know that there are some of the suburban cities. There are a lot of cities around the state that want to do a driver diversion program, but currently it's limited. There are certain cities that are listed in statute, and then the Department of Public Safety then has additional authority to add other cities to the program to give them the authority to do something like this. But because it keeps being sunsetted and sunsetted and sunsetted, there are some cities that don't want to start a whole new program if the sunset's not going to continue. So we are having conversations also with our partners in law enforcement. We're hearing a lot of interest in making this program permanent and available to all cities throughout the state. I think Ms. Siegel is right, and that's why we need to have some conversations with the Department of Public Safety. And if their concern on that side is a staffing and a funding approach, then we're happy to advocate for them to have the resources necessary to implement this in a permanent manner and make it available to all cities. I would also add that this summer, just like party buses, we did move some language around this at the League of Minnesota Cities, and that also passed, again, I think the Improving Service Delivery Committee, and that will be going to the full board for a vote at the November meeting as well.
So I know you mentioned some of our law enforcement partners. So what are conversations like with the Minnesota Chief of Police Association and others like that? I would have to think that they would support a common sense measure like this.
Madam Chair and council members, very preliminary. They have not had their legislative agenda committee meeting yet. That is, I think, next week. And I have drafted a memo to them that's going to be considered next week, asking for their support for this program. I think you're right, Madam Chair, and that law enforcement agencies and prosecutors around the state, just as the city of Minneapolis has a large percentage of our caseload is in administering these moving violations, these driving-related violations, that's a large burden, and our attention could be shifted elsewhere to other higher priority offenses. And we think other communities are going to have a similar experience, and we'll be looking for an alternative process like this.
All right. Okay. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Ms. Siegel, you mentioned earlier, Ms. Lesh, you can stay, this may be for you, something about the financial planning or in some reference to probably some kind of financial literacy program. How is that being administered through this pilot program? How are we delivering that kind of service?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Quincy, the provider that does this program is called Diversion Solutions, and when people are referred to that program, and they get referred in a variety of ways, law enforcement can provide a card when they stop someone for one of these offenses and say, contact them, see if you're eligible. Our hearing office at the government center is referring people. Our prosecutors are referring people from court. So when they get contacted, they run them through the eligibility, and once they are accepted, their staff works with them. They implement the class. For our residents, since we've been involved, they've held the classes in North Minneapolis, a few at the 4th Precinct, and some libraries, places like that, to try to make it more convenient for people to attend. But they will run the classes a couple of times a month, and we'll get people scheduled, send them reminders. They'll show up. It's a 4-hour class. They talk a lot about kind of life skills, other things kind of to help them. How did you get into this situation? It's not just the financial, but a lot of times it's time management and understanding, you need to pay your bills on time and the consequences. So the class is 4 hours, and it accompanies kind of all of those things, along with educating them about what happens when you get a ticket and why you shouldn't ignore it. And then they total up what their fines and fees are that are owed, and they tell them, this is your breakdown. You're going to have to pay this every month by this date, and then they manage all of that.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Bergman?
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. At this point, we will turn it over to Grant Wilson from our Business Licensing Division of CPED. Just at the front end, I'll let you know that we would plan on bringing these 2 proposals forward if approved and if supported by the city for potential inclusion in the omnibus liquor bill at the legislature, which is a large bill with many different liquor provisions in it. And I know that we've started conversations with the hospitality industry and the Licensed Beverage Association. And if there are questions about that, I know Mr. Ranieri would be happy to answer them. But I'm happy to turn it over to Grant Wilson.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. The 2 items I have are today for you are hotel mini bars and temporary on-sale liquor licenses, and I'd like to talk about hotel mini bars. On the screen, you see a small refrigerator with alcoholic beverages in it. You've probably stayed in a hotel that the room was equipped with these. Current state law says that licensed hotels can have these only if they have at least 50 guest rooms. We have requests to install these by hotels smaller than that amount. The city council just amended the city of Minneapolis city council just amended its hotel code within the past year to allow boutique hotels with hotels as small as 5 persons. So we have just prepared on the slide right now is just some real rough draft language about how we might accomplish this. Just removing the room minimums in the state law, and you'll see that this is in 340A of the state law. That is the alcohol code for the state of Minnesota. So we're recommending that change, and if you have any questions on that before I move on to the next item.
I don't. It's makes sense with the other changes that we've been pursuing in Minneapolis. So thank you.
Okay. And the next item relates to temporary on-sale liquor licenses. And just to refresh everybody's memory, temporary on-sale liquor licenses can only be issued to charitable, religious, or other nonprofit organizations that have been in existence for at least 3 years. Also political subcommittees. And due to a state law change a few years ago, microbrewers can also be issued temporary licenses for social events sponsored by the brewer. There are some restrictions that are getting a little difficult for us to get to yes with our customers. Sometimes the current restrictions, for example, the first one is we can only issue 1 temporary on-sale liquor license or temporary on-sale wine or temporary on-sale beer to any one location within a 30-day period. So we have some popular places where our civic events might be held, or events or races or fundraisers where we couldn't allow more than 1 in 30 days. We are recommending that that be lifted. Also, there's a restriction that each applicant may only get 12 days of temporary licenses, none of those to exceed 4 consecutive days. So we just had an application for Holly Dazzle this year, and they're doing, I think, 15 days of events, but not all in concurrent, and we had a hard time making it work. We issue 166 temporary on-sale licenses a year. Again, they're to nonprofit charitable type organizations. And so I reviewed the list of who our applicants have been in the past year or so. Getting to be the majority of them are arts related. So theaters, art galleries, arts groups, like the Northeast Minneapolis Arts Association, NEMA, Northern Clay, the Soap Factory, the College of Art and Design. The next biggest group is our philanthropical foundation, such as the Cancer Research, different funds, MPR, the Minneapolis Foundation, things like that. The next is our religious institutions. Have events at their religious institutions for fundraising that are quite popular. We have a lot of them in that area. So in those cases with religious institutions, they could not have one at their home site more than once every 30 days. And then the group is rounded out by our business associations, our farmers markets, and then our race type events. So we have like the Lopet and different bike races and running events, pond hockey, things like that. So this is something that I think would help us get to yes for our nonprofit groups, and would encourage your support, and I'm happy